Hello and welcome to the Avanti Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Dave Amano, your host, where I interview incredible, just game-changing entrepreneurs from around the world every Wednesday morning on my Avanti Entrepreneur Podcast. And today I have on the show, this is my first repeat guest, part two, Mitzi Purdue. Mitzi, welcome back to the show.
What a complete joy to be back. Thank you.
Well, you are a joy, and that's why I think for the first time, we spoke way too much the first time. I usually keep this about a half an hour, and we went way past that last week. And one of the reasons is you've got such an incredible journey of your life, and you haven't only been watching the parade. You've been actively involved in the parade, right? I say there's three types of people: people that are in the parade, and then there's the people that are watching the parade, and then there's the people that don't even know a parade is going on. And you have been in the parade. And so last week we spoke about your dad, right? So your dad was the founder, one of the co-founders, I believe, or was he the founder of the Sheraton Hotel Chain? And then we had the great opportunity to talk about your late husband, Frank Purdue. And if anybody has ever had chicken, they have heard of Purdue Chicken, which your husband brought to, we'll say, world fame, right? And his commercials in the 80s and were and probably beyond a little bit, were incredible. And I love the fact that we were connected because when I was a senior in high school, I took a public speaking class. And for our final, we got to pick the persona of somebody famous, and I chose your husband, right? How about that? And I
think that's just the coolest thing I've ever heard.
I mean, people were choosing, George Washington, Oprah Winfrey. I chose Frank Purdue. I thought he was great. I loved his commercials back then. Because he was so successful yet so humble, and with a little self-deprecating humor. He wasn't afraid to just be a regular guy, and I think that's what I loved about him. Even though he was built a massively successful company. So in the last episode, Avanti listeners, Avanti family, we talked a lot about the men in Mitzi's life, her dad building the Sheraton from scratch, and then, Frank Purdue. If you want to hear that, go back to last week's episode. It is incredible and chock full of incredible nuggets of learning. But on this episode, we are going to talk about what Mitzi is doing, because Mitzi has been doing in her own right some amazing things for the entrepreneurial world, and continues to do so. So I want to have a little spotlight on Mitzi for this show, and that's why we're doing a part two. Really excited about that, and I want to get into it. First and foremost, a quick shout out to Mark Victor Hansen, who is the co-author with Jack Canfield of Chicken Soup for the Soul and all those series, and he's written a ton of other books and speaking, and he's one of my new best friends. I love him. What a great soul. And he was on my podcast a few weeks ago, and just doing incredible things. And he connected us. So thank you, Mark Victor Hansen, for that. And I know he just came out with a new book called Ask. And I know that that's been a big part of your life, right? As far as just, asking, right? So tell us how asking has gotten you ahead into places in your life, Mitzi, please.
Okay. The reason that Ask resonates with me so much is somewhere up until maybe age 38, I hadn't done much with my life. And here was the problem. I came from a famous father. I had an education to be proud of. I have a degree from Harvard, undergraduate, and then I have a master's degree. But at age 38, when I look around at my life, I realized I really hadn't done much with it. And this all came to a head when, at that time, I wasn't just sitting home eating cherry bonbons. I'd made myself into a rice farmer. And I think you heard me right. Rice, the stuff that if you were Chinese, you'd eat with chopsticks.
Right. Big Ben rice, right?
Okay. Well, I had taken part of my inheritance as one of the Sheraton heiresses. I had taken part of that inheritance and invested in agricultural land. And actually, I loved doing that. It was just absolutely wonderful. But I wasn't using my education or the contacts. I just wasn't living up to potential whatsoever. And at that point, just an amazing thing happened in my life. There, to be a rice grower, you need people who are actually out there doing the work. I mean, I could manage it, I could sell contracts and things like that, but I wasn't out there actually doing it. So to get the best farmer that I could possibly find, I spent like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months asking everybody I knew in my area, which was Davis, California, who's the best farmer in the county? Actually, who's the best farmer in the neighboring 3 counties? And it was sort of a process of triangulation because whoever I asked, they'd give me 3 names, but there was one name that always appeared on all of them. And so I made it my business to make friends with him and try to persuade him to grow for me.
And how did
Well,
that go?
to protect the guilty, I'm going to use a fake name.
All right.
We will call him Peter Smith.
Peter Smith. All right. Generic enough.
All right, dear Peter Smith, there was a reason why he was on everybody's list as the top farmer in the area. And I did get him to grow for me, but I learned his story, why he was so good. He had a most unusual background. He had an IQ of more than 200. And to put that in context, Einstein was 180. Wow. So if you're 200, there were so few people with IQs that high that they couldn't even calibrate how much above 200 he was. But there were articles written about him. In Psychology Today, you could read about how there was a group called the Whiz Kids who had IQs over 200, and they followed what happened to them. And actually, almost all of them came to sad ends. If you're that smart, you probably don't relate to other people very well. And the 40 or so kids who had IQs that high that they followed over the years, they ended up like with alcohol problems or suicides, or they died in car accidents where they shouldn't have died. I mean, they just in one way or another messed up their lives. But there was one shining exception, and that is there was a guy, Peter Smith, who had become a rice farmer in Northern California. And that was my tenant. Now, how does this all relate to ask? I got to know Peter very, very well, because if you spend hours walking through rice fields with somebody and talking about what makes them tick, and I learned that he had a goal in life because he knew he had this fabulous, fabulous IQ. It was a gift. He wanted to give something back in return. And what he wanted to give back was he wanted to write a great book. It would be called Life, an Owner's Manual. And he said that he had conceived this idea when he was 20. At the time of the story that I'm telling right now, he was 68. Every decade of his life, he was more convinced that he wanted to write this book, but he felt that he needed to do more research and to get it all together. Finally, at age 68, my tenant, somebody who by this time I was really fond of him, although I was 30 years younger, so we're not talking romance, we're talking fond, this is a good man. He was diagnosed with terminal heart disease.
Oh, no.
Which meant that he couldn't write his book. And, if you or I or any of our listeners or viewers got a diagnosis that you had something terminal, of course it's depressing. But for Peter, it was the end of the world because it meant that his whole life he had been building towards this one thing, and now he'd never be able to do it. He'd never be able to write the great book. Well, this has a somewhat happy ending and then a miserable ending. Happy ending part. I had heard of the Pritikin Clinic, which is very big on diet and exercise and meditation and just turning your life around. Peter went to this clinic for an entire month. And at the end of it, he had lost probably 10 or 15 pounds. He was, he was eating right. He had a perfect diet. He was, having the right meditation, every possible good thing you could do. And guess what? An almost miracle happened because with the right diet and exercise and mental attitude, this man lived another 30 years.
Wow.
Okay, so that's the really happy part of it.
Yeah.
now the part that was miserable for him but changed my life. He came back. This man who couldn't before walk across the room with that crippling heart pain could now walk 10 miles. And he was doing that. I mean, he was just doing everything that we know today is right. And by the way, we're talking probably 30 years ago. Well, I was so happy for him. And I said, Peter, this is the most wonderful news in the whole world. I'm so happy for you. Write your book. And he said, yes, I just have to do a little bit more research.
Oh, no.
Okay.
The painting was never done, right? Yeah.
He had another 30 years to do it, and he never did.
I would have loved to read that book.
Oh, so would I. However, I realized that in a way, I was doing the same kind of thing that he was doing. I was always putting off trying for the things that I wanted to do. And I had always dreamed of television, but I'd never dared try.
Mm-hmm.
I was always putting things off. And on top of that, I had a pretty good idea, because I knew him really well, why he had never even started writing the great book. I think he was afraid of failure. And if I were to share the best thing that I can out of my life's experience is, don't let fear of failure hold you back. And so I decided in my own mind to redefine failure. For me, failure was not trying and not giving it my all. And actually, there's several things that I wanted. I had wanted to be a writer. I was so afraid of rejection slips that I'd never actually written anything and sent them out. I wanted to be in television. The idea of failing an audition, that was just too horrible to contemplate. But I decided that I would redefine failure. Failure was not trying. And let me tell you what happened within a year. Within 1 year, where I began sending articles out to local newspapers and magazines and so forth. Well, an article that I wrote became the cover story of a local in-flight magazine. I used that to leverage getting an interview for the farm broadcasting show at the CBS affiliate in Sacramento. And it worked.
It worked.
Yeah, in the space of 1 year of deciding to redefine failure. And by the way, I got all sorts of rejection slips along the way and turn downs and falling on my face, but who cares? If you try enough, and if you're not afraid of failure, you sure up your odds of success. So within a year, I had a television show focused on farming. Good morning and welcome to Country Magazine. Okay, that was one. I had a syndicated radio show. It was Tips from Farmer Mitzi.
Wow.
And I had a syndicated newspaper column. It was called The Environment and You.
You were like the Dear Abby of agriculture, right?
But to me, the lesson was fear of failure and unwillingness to ask for these things that I wanted had kept me not doing anything with the potential that I had. And so again, and I share this story in Mark Victor Hansen's book, that it was asking for these things that I wanted that they didn't drop in my lap. And it led to a very, very happy and satisfying career.
But you didn't give up. You kept on asking. You got rejected many, many times, but you kept on asking. And I love your definition of failure, because it's true. Failure is not trying. And then even if you are trying, just not giving up, right? And I think failure is giving up. Like you have a dream and maybe you try 10, 15, 20, 100 times and it doesn't work out yet, but you give up. I think that's failure, right? That's failure.
But the other side of failure is just the act of giving it everything that you've got.
Yeah.
Here's what's going to happen. If you're giving it everything you've got, I mean, I don't know what, I can't peer into the soul of our listeners, but for every person, there's probably something they want that they don't have. And to get there, maybe you have to take courses. Maybe you have to read books. Maybe you have to attend conventions or lectures or join clubs where you're going to hang out with the people who can help you become all you can be. And just the act of giving it your all and trying means that you're going to be much farther ahead than if you hadn't tried. So maybe you get that turned down. Maybe you fail the, I don't know, maybe you fail the audition, whatever. Just the act of trying means that you're going to be a bigger person and farther along the way to being a success the next time.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And here's why I love it even more, Mitzi, as it relates to you. And you use the term, heiress, right? So
That's
you were, yeah, you were a hotel heiress, right? And so you didn't really probably have to do anything. Like you probably could have been that person who, socialized and had lunch and golfed and hobbies. So you didn't really have to do anything, right? But I'm guessing, right? But you wanted to take what was given to you and kind of bring it to the next level, right? That's what I'm sensing. Where when you said hotel heiress, I'm thinking of, and I can't remember her first name now because she's Paris Hilton, right? And
I would love to meet her, but I never have.
well, there's another. Well, you maybe give her a call. I mean, you guys are.
Maybe I should ask. Okay.
Well, you should ask. Well, she can learn a lot from you because what did she do with her being an heiress? Well, she kind of just she used her fame and did reality shows or whatever. Where I mean, you actually rolled your sleeves up literally and did some really really productive things. And so so you should call her or reach out to her. Or better yet, she should reach out to you because I think she could have so much to learn from you, right? And so I want to learn more about what you've been doing since then, and because like I said, you didn't really have to do anything, but you chose to bring your life to the next level based on your own drive, your own talents, right, your own dreams, and a couple of phone calls ago between you and me. You had shared your age with me, right? And so even at this stage where there's, at this stage where you are, there's a lot of women and men who, and maybe they've earned it, but just they want to kind of, relax. They want to retire, right? They just want to, get on that chair and on the sun and chill out, right? In this stage of their life. But even you at this stage, you're still go, right? I mean, you're writing books, you're speaking, right? You're doing so many incredible entrepreneurial activities. I think that's why we hit it off on the phone the first time we talked, because your energy was so attractive to me, right? I was like, you're the light and I'm the moth, right? I'm like, whoa, and I couldn't wait to interview you because I think you're such an inspiration, right? And I that's why I wanted to have on the podcast because frankly, a lot of Avanti entrepreneurs, they're just starting out as entrepreneurs. They're younger entrepreneurs. They're maybe they're thinking about starting a business, or it's been maybe they're in their first year or two. And I just want to show them that, man, if they hit that stride of finding their joy, it doesn't end. It doesn't have to end, right? I mean, it's just, you obviously get so much energy from what you do, and it just makes you want to do more of it, right? So I want to learn more. So, with the rice and the agriculture, and then you had the whole, media thing going on, right, which was incredible. And so, where did it go from there? Because I know you had done and you continue to do a lot more.
Let's see. Let me comment about the rice for a moment.
Yeah. You're making me hungry. You're making me want rice.
Well, once I wasn't afraid to ask and to kind of move out there and do things and wasn't afraid of failure. I had something really fun happen, which is if you're a rice grower, as I was, I thought, wouldn't it be absolutely neat if I could make my land available to the local university, the University of California, Davis, for rice experiments? I mean, because rice at that point, I'm not sure what it is today, but it was the world's staple grain. Mm. And if you could make just any small change in rice cultivation, could have a big impact. Well, one day, I was listening to a lecture on, this had to do with anthropology. And by the way, this is slightly an entrepreneurial story, because it's, to me, part of being an entrepreneur is putting together things that other people might not see. And in this case, I'm listening to a lecture on villages in Vietnam. And we're talking back, 1970s. I'm sure every bit of this has changed since then. But back then, there were certain villages that were very, very wealthy, and certain others that were just hard scrabble. And the anthropology part of this was the very wealthy villages, the girls would never be told the secret of why the wealthy villages were very successful in growing rice. And they wouldn't be told that because it was simply known that they'd marry outside the village, and they didn't want these secrets to go to the other villages.
Right.
And I started thinking, what could cause one village to be ever so much better than another? And then I started thinking, well, the biggest limit in rice culture is nitrogen fertilizer. I mean, if you want to really bump up your yields, you put a lot of effort and money into nitrogen fertilizer. Might that be what was going on between the wealthy villages and the non-wealthy villages? So I began asking people, this is reaching out and asking, which I don't think I would have done before. But in this case, I reached out and asked the anthropologists, what is it? And it turned out that there's this plant, and it's called azala. So I began looking up, what does azala do? Well, guess what? It's the absolute, we're going to get into some technical agriculture stuff, but I hope you enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that you rotate in the United States between corn and soybeans is soybeans will simply take nitrogen out of the air and put it into the soil, and the next crop, corn, uses a lot of nitrogen. So that's why we rotate. But it occurred to me, might there be the same thing where there's a plant that takes nitrogen from the air, except it would grow in water? And it turned out that azala, good Lord, azala would fix nitrogen from the air. And that would make, almost for free, one of the biggest limitations for rice culture. So I went to, again, this is asking, I went to one of the professors at University of California at Davis, and I said, does azala fix nitrogen? And they said, well, yes. And I said, could it be used in agriculture in the United States? And they said, probably not, because they said that Vietnam, it's a jungle environment. It's a very, it's very wet. And I think I've got this right. It's a high pH, acidic. The azala would grow there, but it wouldn't grow here. And you also wouldn't want to import it because, a native, it could disrupt the whole ecosystem, and it would take 100 years to bring it into balance. So they said, wouldn't it be nice, but no, it won't work. So I told Peter Smith, the genius guy who knows everything in the world about everything there is, and I showed him pictures of azala, and I said, what a shame, it could be so good for agriculture, but take 100 years to acclimatize it and to have the natural predators keep it in check. And he said, oh, about 20 miles from here, there's an old China camp. And at this China camp, it's called Gilsizer Slough. I've seen that plant. It's already adapted, and it already has the competing plants to keep it in check. Let's give it a try.
Wow.
So Peter Smith and I went to the University of California to the people who study rice and said, let's see if this works. Well, guess what? It did work. It worked beautifully. It not only fixed nitrogen from the air, but it had this wonderful property where it would, azala kind of looks like the green scum you might have seen on ponds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it did this wonderful thing where it would shade out the weeds, and the rice shoots would grow past the azala, and it would shade out the weeds. So it was fabulous. It had an impact on rice culture, not so much in the United States, because one of the unfortunate things about azala is that it turns itself off for nitrogen fixing at a level that's too low to be economic in the United States, but in places where you can't afford extra nitrogen, it was a good thing.
Right.
So I found being involved in agriculture to this day just incredibly fascinating, because the amount of impact a good idea can have is staggering. Oh, and of course, my late husband was a good example of that with his growing chickens.
Yes. Yeah. He did pretty well, right? Well,
Right.
so I love just your sense of, it's almost like you're like an investigative reporter, right? You want to dig and dig and dig deeper. And then even when you're told no, right, you were told no, this wouldn't work in the US, you know, you were like, well, we'll see, right? And you kept on digging more and digging more. And then Genius Peter said, let's give it a shot. And then,
For all we know, just imagine with the pandemic, if the uh, supply chains are so disrupted that it becomes too expensive to use synthetic nitrogen, it might even become important again.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Mitzi, before we go, we got about 5 more minutes. I want to learn more about what you're doing today to help inspire and teach and transfer your love of life and great energy to others. So what's going on today in your world of making impact?
I've teamed up with Mark Victor Hansen to write a book. It's going to be called, we have a working title, and it's 40 Tips for Thriving and Surviving During the Pandemic. And we have all sorts of tips in it that can help people do better. And I have one that I'll show you. That you are looking at a piece of a lady's pantyhose.
Mm-hmm.
You were looking here at, a lot of us, and I hope you, and I hope most of our listeners, have furnaces.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have furnaces, you're going to have furnace filters. And if you take the furnace filter apart, you've got about maybe 20 feet of this. This is cut out from a furnace filter.
Yeah, for those of you that are listening, you can go to Avanti Entrepreneur on YouTube, and you could see what she's holding up. But basically, it's the part of the furnace filter that she's formulated into what looks like a mask.
Right. Okay. Then I take this mask and I stuff it inside one layer of, or one leg of lady's pantyhose, and it becomes a mask.
That's your mask.
And you can make it in probably 3 minutes. The furnace filter has the same characteristics as an N95 mask. Both of them filter out like to 3 microns, which traps viruses. And like in my building, we have the Betsy Ross Brigade, and we have just we've just made 96 of these to give to the local sheriff's office.
Wow. Who would have thought the sheriff's office be wearing pantyhose on their face, right?
I know. I told them when I made that gift, I said, this gift, you have to know about donor intent. I want you to tease each other.
Yes, definitely.
Otherwise, I'm going to come take it back.
Definitely could have some fun with it.
But this is just one of the tips from the 40 Tips for Surviving and Thriving.
When is that book coming out?
I'm just giving it to the editor tomorrow.
Okay. And here we are on it's April 14th right now. So this is going to air in June. So by now they'll be able to buy it.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Beautiful.
Anyway, that's been exciting because I think it's going to save lives. I think it'll make a great big difference.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to read that book. Mitzi, if people want to learn more about you and get in touch with you, experience who you are, your products, maybe get in touch with you, what are the best ways to do that?
Let's see. If they go to Mitzi at MitziPurdue.com, that's my professional website. And Mitzi is spelled M-I-T-Z-I. And Purdue is not spelled like the university, it's spelled like chicken. It's P-E-R-D-U-E. So if they go to MitziPurdue.com, they'll get me.
And I've been there. It's a great website. You got a lot of great stuff going on there. So, well, Mitzi, thank you so much for 2 interviews. I appreciate your spirit and the joy that you bring, and the journey that you're sharing. It's such great lessons and nuggets and inspiration. So truly appreciate it. And you keep on going. And I hope that after this craziness, the pandemic, that I can actually meet you face to face. I'm going to come wherever you're speaking. Maybe I'll come see you sometime.
I'd like nothing better. This has just been pure joy. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, Missy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we're definitely going to keep in touch. So thanks again to Mark Victor Hansen for introducing us. I also want to thank you, Avanti listeners, Avanti family, for listening and or watching this podcast. If you want more, I've got a ton more at AvantiEntrepreneur.com. I've been doing this for almost 4 years, or every week. I've got some great interviews. If you want to hear this one again, it's right there too. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Have a great day, Mitzi. Have a great day, Avanti. And make sure to stay awesome.